Hilchos Shegagos Perek Chamishi, the laws of sacrifices for inadvertent transgressions, chapter 5. This chapter revolves around two principles. First is called Yediyah. Yediyah means knowledge. The Torah, when it describes doing a sin by mistake, it says a person does a sin by mistake. Oy hoida elav chatase asher chata. If he finds out, if he comes to know the sin which he did, then he has to bring a sacrifice. So since Torah uses the word hoida, he comes to know, that teaches us that just being in a state of awareness already creates the liability. So that if you do a sin, and then you become aware of it, and then you commit the same sin, and you become aware of it again, the fact that you had twice the awareness means you have to bring a sacrifice twice. Whereas if you didn't have an awareness, and you committed the same sin a number of times, you're only liable once when you find out. That's one basic principle that runs through this chapter. The other basic principle, which kind of runs parallel to it, is called gufin mechulakin. Gufin mechulakin means different entities. If the same sin involved different entities, even if you only get your awareness at the end, since the sin engaged in a different entity each time, so you're liable for each time. And the classic place that this plays out is in forbidden relationships. That's basically going to be the whole chapter in short. If you repeat a sin of a forbidden relationship with the same woman multiple times, so then it depends if you had awareness or not. But if you repeat the same sin with multiple women, so the fact that even if you have only one lapse of awareness, but the fact that there's different women involved each time makes a new liability. That's the two basic principles that are going to go through the entire chapter. So if you get that, you have the whole thing. Let's see it inside. He's going to describe it very well. Halacha Aleph. Haba'al erva biyais harbe behelim achas. A person has a repeated amount of relations with one specific forbidden woman in one lapse of awareness, or behelim echad. Afal pisha haya ben be'ilo be'ilo yamim harbe. Even if between the relations there were many days. Hayil v'loy neidalei bintayim. Since he never found out, he never came to an awareness that this relationship was forbidden. V'harei guf echad, and it's the same body each time. It's the same entity. It's the same woman each time. Harei hakel shgaga achas. So everything according to halacha is called one inadvertence. Ve'enei chayav elachatas achas, and therefore only liable one sin offering. Avolim shagagba. But let's say you had relations with her inadvertently, and then you found out. You realized what the problem was. Then again you entered into a lapse of awareness. Same woman. Had relations with her again, and then you found out again. And then again entered your lapse of awareness and had relations with her. Here you're going to be liable for every time that you had relations. This is the big rule. Yediyos means awareness divides the inadvertent acts. The fact that you came to an awareness in between separates the acts. Now, that's all about the man. Let's now compare the man and the woman. Let's say the man has relations with the woman multiple times in one lapse of awareness. So the opposite case. See, here it was the man has the light bulb in between. She doesn't. What if for him it's all one big question mark, it's one big inadvertence, but she came to realize between each relationship that it was forbidden. Which means that for her, the relations were in multiple lapses of awareness. So the Rambam says, it goes according to each person. Who may be chatas achas? He only has to bring one sin offering because he only had one lapse of awareness. She brings a separate one for each time. Who hayula yediyas bintayim, if he had the knowledge in between, he behelim echad, and for her it was in one lapse. Who may be chatayis harbe, v'hi meviyah chatas achas. He brings multiple sin offerings, and she only has to bring one. So this is all if it's one man, one woman. But what if you introduce multiple women? Halacha gimel haba al arayis harbe behelim echad. One person has relations with multiple forbidden women in one lapse of awareness. Afal pisha kulan mishem echad, even if they all carry the same prohibition. We'll soon see an example of this. So it's the same sin, 5 different times with 5 different people. Hoyel vehin gufin mechulakim, since they're different bodies, different entities. Chayav al kol achas ve'achas. We don't care about your lapse of awareness. The sin involved different people. That makes it a different sin, and you're liable for each time. Ketzad, what's an example of this? A person has 5 wives. and they all happen to be nida, menstruating currently, and he has relations with them all. So it's the same sin, relations with a nida, but it's 5 different women. Or he has relations with 5 of his sisters or 5 of his daughters in one lapse of awareness. Chayav al kol guf beguf, you're liable for each body because the body creates a difference in the halacha. Mikana talamed, says the Rambam, from here we learn, and I may have to correct what I said yesterday about this, shezesha amru chachamim, that the statement made by the sages, which we had yesterday, Habal haschur vehevi schur alav behelim echad chayav chatas achas. Yesterday we said, if a person simultaneously copulates with a man while a man copulates with him, he's only liable to 1 sin offering. Bamed dvarim amurim, based on what we're saying now, that's only true kishahaya oiseh haschur atzma, if it was the same man. So somehow you're with one man and you're copulating with him while he copulates with you. Avolim, yes, but for each man there's only one other man involved. Avolim haya zechur acher, but if it's 2 other men, one man is copulating with another man while another man copulates with him, bein shabal shneim, bein shabal zeh vehevi zeh alav, whether he has relations with both or he's copulating with one is copulating with him, chayav al kol guf beguf, you're liable to each body separately. For who adin bebala behema vehevi behema alav, same thing if it's an animal. Bestiality, simultaneous bestiality is only going to be liable to 1 sin offering if it's 1 animal. But the moment it's 2 animals, now you have 2 bodies involved. 2 bodies involved, 2 sin offerings. Halacha dalid ha'isha shehevia aleh behemais harbe behelem achas. If a woman commits bestiality with multiple animals in one lapse of awareness, chayeves chatas al kol behema o behema share gufin michulakin. Even though animals typically are not treated like humans in halacha, but over here we follow the same principle. Multiple entities, multiple animals, multiple violations, therefore multiple sin offerings. It would be exactly like if she would have relations with multiple men in one lapse of awareness, where she's liable for a separate sin offering for every man. We had these cases a long time ago in the laws of divorce. We come back to them now in the context of sin offerings. A woman is married. Her husband takes a trip overseas. And she hears that he died, or witnesses come that he died, in which case the halacha is that she's allowed to get married. Venises, and she got married, remarried to another man. Bein al pi atzma, bein al pi bezdin, whether by her own testimony or by the court's ruling. V'noida shabayla kayam. Boom. 2 years into this new marriage, we find out the husband's still alive, the original husband. That means that the whole time she's been living with this new man, she's been a married woman committing adultery. Chayeves karban echad, this is called 1 lapse of awareness and only liable to 1 sin offering. But if she had married or acted promiscuously with multiple men, chayeves chatas al kol ish ve'ish mipnei shehem gufin mechulakin, same principle, liable to 1 sin offering per person because they are different entities. Even though again it's all 1 lapse of awareness. The whole reason why all these relations are a problem is because she's under the wrong impression that her husband is dead. So it's 1 wrong impression, but multiple bodies, multiple sin offerings. Let's say a person has relations with a nida, menstruating woman, inadvertently. V'tahara minidasa. Unbeknownst to the man, she actually became pure from being a nida. V'tavla, she went to the mikveh. V'chazra v'ra'asam nida. A month later, she's back to the period. She becomes a nida again. But for the man, it's the same lapse of awareness. He has relations with her again. Chayav al kol pam v'fam. Here is an exception. Even though, again, for him, it's 1 lapse of awareness, he's liable for each individual time. Even though for him, it's 1 lapse of awareness, and it's 1 person, 1 body. Since for the woman, it's different times of menstruation, 1 month and a second month, so the 2 times are separate, and she becomes like 2 separate women. Halacha vav. We have to remind ourselves of a rule in the laws of forbidden relationships that every woman has what's called a veses, an expected time when she may see blood and she may menstruate. When you're near that time, there's a prohibition to have relations with her unless you ask and find out if it's exactly a pure time or an impure time. But when you're not near that time frame, the husband doesn't have to ask. He can assume she's pure. So what happens, says the Rambam, a person has relations with his wife not at the time of her usual expected sighting. Nevertheless, she sees blood She experiences a menstrual sighting during the relations. This couple is actually exempt from a sin offering. That's like a person beyond this control. That's not even inadvertent. Shegag means you should have checked. You should have been precise. You weren't precise, you came to a sin. Had you checked into the matter and asked questions, you wouldn't come to the inadvertent act. And that's why you have to have an atonement. Because you should have asked, you should have checked into it, you should have figured out. And since you didn't, you have to atone with a sin offering. But this husband, what should he do? She was pure. It wasn't even the time expected to be sighting. This is Hashem, beyond your control, putting in a circumstance. Therefore, no matter where the blood was discovered, on a cloth of hers, on a cloth of his, they're exempt. But if he transgressed and had relations with her near the time of the expected sighting, and he thought he's going to be a chacham, he's going to be a smart man, a wisecrack, and he'll be able to have relations and finish, withdraw, before she sees blood, and she actually sees the blood, they are liable to bring a sacrifice. That's an inadvertence. You should have been more careful. Therefore, if he discovers blood on his cloth, they're both impure, ritually impure, and they have to bring a sacrifice. If she finds it on her cloth, now maybe indeed he's not impure. So if she had wiped herself immediately after the husband withdrew, without delay, they're both impure and liable to a sacrifice. But if she waited enough time, where she would stretch her hand under the pillow or blanket to take a cloth to check with, and then she wiped herself, they're both only impure out of doubt, because maybe indeed he withdrew in time and the blood only came now later. So they're impure out of doubt and they're exempt from a sacrifice. If she waited even longer, enough time to go off the bed, wash her internal area, and then she wiped herself and found blood, Baila Tahir, her husband is indeed off the hook and pure, we can assume that he finished safely with enough time before the impurity began, and only now the menstruation began. Halacha Zayin, Misha Avar Ubal Samuch Laveses Al Das Shetikdoim Biyase Liriyas Hadam. Same case, a person transgresses, has relations near the expected time of sighting, thinking that he's going to be successful in withdrawing early before the blood comes. And the woman feels she begins to bleed during the relations, and she actually tells her husband, I'm impure. What should he do? Interesting halacha. The husband cannot withdraw while he is erect, as we explained in the laws of forbidden relationships, because that's also a pleasure. If he didn't know that, and he did withdraw while erect, he's liable twice. Two sin offerings. Achas al knisasei, shahari ba'al nida, the achas al yitziyasei. One for the entry, relations with a nida, and one for the exit. Shayitziyasei hana alei kibiyasei, because the exit is as pleasurable as the entry. Says the Rambam, when do we say it's two liabilities here? Where he did know that it's forbidden to have relations now. He just thought that he's going to be able to do it before the blood comes. And what he didn't know was the prohibition to exit right away. Which means there's two lapses of awareness here. But if he didn't know to begin with that you can't have relations near the expected time of sighting, and he also didn't know that you cannot exit, withdraw immediately if a woman becomes impure, here only be liable once. Because the entry and the exit were both considered one simultaneous lapse of awareness, because he didn't know anything. He did the whole thing in one state of unawareness. Same thing is true while these two halachot are talking about a woman, his own wife, in terms of nida. The same thing applies with all other forbidden woman. Sheim shagagul ba'ala erva al das sheim muteres. If he has a mistake and he has relations with an erva, thinking that she's permitted, and he finds out she's forbidden during the relationship, he should not withdraw immediately, because the exit is as pleasurable as the entry, and he should wait rather till it dies down. And if he didn't know that it's forbidden to do that, and he separated while erect, only be liable for one sin offering, because again, it's all one lapse of awareness.